Not many games can replace a really good RPG, with depth of the story, complexity of its characters, and difficulties in the gameplay itself through puzzles or enemies. It really can be a complete experience and create a dedicated gamer for a lifetime. These are 10 RPG titles I think have the best chance of being some of the top within the genre. Before I jump into it, if you like hearing about upcoming titles, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and let me know down below what game you are most looking forward to. Now, I'm not sure how many people are aware of the Baldur's Gate series, but this was one of the most difficult and unforgiving games I played early on in my gaming years. Baldur's Gate is a party-based RPG that uses a modified D&D rule set. And while the first two games were real-time, although if I remember correctly, I think you could actually pause the action to issue some party commands, the third entry is switching it up a bit and going to a turn-based system. I remember some points in the original games I would have welcomed some forced turn-based action, as I think I would have had an easier time managing it, but I'm sure there are those that would prefer the preceding style. You're never going to make everyone happy. It's been a long road for Baldur's Gate 3 to release, but now that it seems to clearly be happening, I couldn't be more excited. I am anticipating some challenging, nostalgic gameplay. Release is planned for August 2020. Perhaps this title doesn't necessarily belong in the list, but being that they're revamping quite a few things and adding a whole new campaign that you can play instead of the old one, I figured it deserved a spot. Set 20 years after the outcome of the original game, the continent of Rayclast is slowly recovering following the death of Catawba. For the most part, the mechanics are going to be the same, but they have made some tweaks. The biggest changes they have made with Path of Exile 2 are an improved skill system, 19 new Ascendancy classes, and some improvements to the game's engine. But ultimately, you end up at the same endgame no matter what path you choose. We may get lucky and see a beta for this late in 2020, but for the official release expectation should be set for sometime in 2021. Wasteland 3 is an upcoming post-apocalyptic squad-based RPG with turn-based combat. It is being developed using the Unity engine by Exile Entertainment. This was a crowd-funded project that looks to be another solid addition to the niche of isometric RPG shooters. The setting of the game is said to be the freezing wastelands of a post-apocalyptic Colorado, and you are the last surviving member of Team November, a ranger squad. If you're a fan of the first two Fallouts, the ones that were done with an isometric perspective, also, obviously the first two Wastelands, this might be something you're looking for. Release is currently set for August 28th, 2020. Games like this, without a doubt, owe a huge debt to Dark Souls for pretty much creating this market of challenging games. Now, maybe that's not entirely fair to say. There are other challenging games before Dark Souls, but the influences are obvious when you really look at it. Regardless, Mortal Shell looks to carve out its own spot within this niche, and recently even the developer themselves seemed to be taken aback by the response to their beta release. The original plan was to just hand out about 20 keys, not via giveaway or anything. They just threw it up in a message on Twitter or their Discord or something. I can't remember where, but the response to that was obviously bad. They didn't realize how many people were wanting to try it. They quickly realized their mistake, however, and decided to open up the beta for anyone wanting to download. So despite an early fumble, once this beta opened up and people really got to try it out, you only heard about the game itself now, which is really good news. Mortal Shell will feel very similar to Dark Souls, especially starting out. There are some key differences though. The most noticeable in my opinion, and one that could frustrate Dark Souls players early on, is that your attacks will feel heavier than you may be used to. Getting the hang of how many attacks your character can let loose before gaining your composure is critical to getting the hang of the game. Another big difference is the Harden ability, which you can activate pretty much at any time. This allows you to absorb damage and really is your mulligan in the game if you overstep at any point in a fight and need to save yourself from the enemy's counterattack. I honestly like this mechanic. I think Mortal Shell is executing the balance of paying obvious homage to Dark Souls while setting itself apart just enough to be different. Open beta is out now on the Epic Game Store. The full release is due out on Epic late 2020 or on Steam in 2021.
Blizzard has not had the best reputation in the last few years, and while I always used to look forward to announcements by them, I admittedly have been less enthusiastic lately whenever they say something. Diablo 4 for me is kind of the last swing before I give up on them entirely. I love the Diablo series. I even kind of like the much panned Diablo 3 game. Although at the time I played it, I was hardly playing games, so I was probably just thankful to be playing something. But Diablo 4 is doing some new things that piques my interest. They seem to be going back to the occult style from the first two games. Hopefully it keeps heading that direction and truly goes back to its roots. Series mainstays of procedurally generated dungeons and loot-focused character building are returning, but also incorporating some new features like an open world. They seem to be taking a small step towards an MMORPG in that you'll be able to see other people in the open world, but it won't be one massive server. You will have population limits depending on your zone. So if you're in a city, it will have a higher limit, seem more dense and busy, but if you're out in the wild, that limit will be much lower. Other players will be more scarce, and you will feel much more alone without a party to help you along the way. Diablo 4 is also going to have world bosses that spawn, so if you're wandering around and one is happening nearby, you can just go take part and get your share of the loot. You don't necessarily need to be invited to the group currently hacking away at the monster. The game is also going to be non-linear, and the zones will scale to your level, or the party leader's level. At certain points in the story, there will be a checkpoint of sorts that will require you to have completed certain objectives before being allowed to continue. Diablo 4's release date is the worst of the news, though. I honestly wish they had waited until a little further along before announcing it, because some of the stuff I'm reading at the moment is saying that it's a good possibility a release date is possibly in 2022. And that sucks. Either way, hopefully Blizzard can get a little redemption from that Warcraft Reforged mess they released a bit ago. If they don't, I won't be much interested in anything else they do afterwards. First-person perspective RPGs seem to be done less often, but when they are executed properly, they can be some of the most memorable. This one is a sequel to the 2004 game Vampire Masquerade: Bloodlines. Shocker, I know. Bloodlines 2 is played mainly from a first-person perspective in 21st century Seattle. You start off as a thin blood vampire with generally weak vampiric abilities. You have a few different thin blood disciplines to choose from early on, each having their own unique and upgradable powers. At some point, though, in the story, you will join one of 5 full-blood clans. I'm sure it's way more complex than that, but you get the gist. Games like this always kind of remind me of Elder Scrolls in some way. When it comes to the different factions, different races, you obviously have the vampires, but also werewolves and demons. I'm sure that there's going to be some not-so-subtle racism that this game has between the city's different populations. Dragon Age and, again, Elder Scrolls always have some form of this, and if executed properly, it can add some complexities to the story. This game seems like it's going to have a lot of layers to peel back story-wise, and I always look forward to exploring every aspect of them. Moving on to combat. From what I've seen so far, you have some of the classic vampire abilities to assist you in stealth attacks, or if you're a total maniac, I'm sure you could just smash your way into and through certain situations. Turning into a fog and moving through the air ducts, as you see in this video, is obviously one clever way of getting the jump on someone, but I am sure you're going to have many more abilities to choose from in your arsenal. It seems like one of those games you play the style you want as you go. Release is set for sometime later in 2020. Godfall is an upcoming RPG being developed by Counterplay Games. The first title to be officially confirmed for the PlayStation 5, this game is set in a high fantasy setting split into the realms of Earth, Water, Air, Fire, and Spirit, where players take the role of one of the last exalted Knights Order to prevent a major apocalyptic event. The game is described as a looter slasher, an obvious influence from the looter shooter style of The Division and Destiny, and maybe more accurately Warframe, where you complete missions and gain better loot for further quests. The focus of the combat is on melee attacks rather than ranged ones. Release is currently set for late 2020, so probably coming out with the PS5 if I had to guess. This is a new game from the developers of the Dark Souls series. These guys have been making excellent, challenging titles for over 30 years, and Elden Ring I expect to be no different. This game is a dark fantasy action RPG, which, to be honest, sounds exactly how you would describe any of the Souls games. But as of right now, From Software has been extremely mum on the details, only content being this announcement trailer.
Probably the most interesting thing that we know of Elden Ring's development is that George R.R. Martin, the writer behind Game of Thrones, is putting his efforts into this game, which I find very interesting. But as of yet, we don't really have any gameplay footage, and while I don't usually give any attention to something that I can't see gameplay of, I feel that the consistency of this developer warrants a segment in this video, albeit a small one. There is a placeholder release date of December 31st, 2020 on Amazon, but I would bet for a release for sometime in 2021. Here we have another isometric RPG. Magic Legends seeks to cash in on the market first made by Diablo many years before it. You take on the role of a planeswalker. Those familiar with the card game will recognize that. At launch, you will have a choice of 5 classes. You could assume that this has something to do with the game's 5 colors. Not necessarily confirmed, but it's not a stretch to think about. Your character will have 3 upgradable abilities, a couple buffs, and a class trait. In homage to the card game, you will also build a separate deck of 12 cards that will rotate as you play the game, giving you a random hand of 4 spells at any time. The game is going to be free to play. I'm sure we'll have some form of cash shop at some point, but the details of that have not been revealed, so we have no idea how it's going to be implemented. Magic Legends will come to the PC in 2020 and PS4 and Xbox One in 2021. I can't make a top RPGs video and not mention this upcoming behemoth. The world was originally created by Mike Pondsmith as a tabletop role-playing game and heavily inspired by the novel Hardwired and the classic movie Blade Runner. The team behind the Witcher games bring this new world to our fingertips, set in the dystopian Night City, an open world with 6 regions. This game world itself isn't supposed to be as big as some other games, but the layers and complexities within Night City are going to make it seem, at first, probably almost overwhelming. I'm a little nervous this game has been hyped up too much, and I'm not helping things by adding to the noise, but I felt a little better after some bigger content creators came out and said that they had been invited down to the developer's place to play an early version of the game. And some of these guys had mentioned that they were skeptical the game would be able to deliver, yet insisted that it did. So take that for what it's worth. Maybe they were paid to say that or some shit. Think what you will. One thing is for sure, that this is going to be a major game. Whether that's a major success or a major letdown, only time will tell. I've pre-ordered my copy off of Steam, and I can't wait to get started. I'm even planning on upgrading my PC for this game. Seemed like a good time for it. Release date has been pushed back a couple times, and at the moment sits at November 19th, 2020 to come out. Happy hacking. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more content on upcoming games. Have a great day.